Great crowd today, and let's get going. So the agenda today is pretty simple. We'll start off as we do every Real Story Group presentation with a little bit of an introduction, as well as giving you a sense of our perspective, where we're coming from, how we look at this world that we're talking about today, and as well we'll preface this presentation with a disclaimer. But the meat of the presentation we'll start out with a little bit on the wrong way to select a web content management system, and kind of some things that we've learned over the years and some mistakes that we see happening over and over again. And then we'll finish up with what we think is the right way to select a web content management system. So for those of you who don't know the Real Story Group, we've been around for a little over 13 years now, and what we do is really twofold. So fundamentally, we're an industry analyst firm who produces research. Right? In that research, we analyze the weaknesses and strengths of the various tools that are out there at your disposal, and we talk about the weaknesses and strengths of the vendors that produce those tools, and we do so in a series of detailed, deep dive research reports that really pit the vendors head to head and show you those strengths and weaknesses, and really try to educate you on what you should know as a buyer. The other half of our offering is consulting services. So we do a couple different kinds of consulting. Primarily, we do technology audits. So we come in and help you assess where you are today, and then look at where you want to be in the future, and help you put together a strategic yet practical roadmap to get there. As well as we do a lot of product and vendor selection projects. So many people come to us with the problem that we're talking about today and say, Real Story Group, we know we need a new web content management system. Can you help us pick the right one for us? And that's something that, again, we're very passionate about, and we've, over the last 13 years, developed a methodology for doing so that we think is the right way, in which I'll be talking about more today. So just to put this in a little bit of context, web content and experience management is one of the 8 areas that we look at in the digital marketing technology and digital workplace technology space. This is the world that we live in. We look at these 8 areas, and we follow the vendors and the products that they put out very, very closely. And again, these are the 8 different areas that we produce research reports on. So we'll be primarily talking about the first one on this list, web content management, today. But I just wanted to let you know this is where our world is we look at this world through the lens of all of these different areas. And I'm sure many of you have seen this. If you haven't, welcome. This is our kind of infamous little technology subway map. And really what we're trying to show here is those different areas, those marketplaces that we are watching on a daily basis. They are connected in some ways, right? If you look at the hubs, if you will, on this little subway map kind of motif, you'll see some of the biggest names in the software world, which is interesting to know, in the sense that these big names they're all trying to be players in all these different areas. But for you as buyers, it's important for you to know that you have options. It's not just these big players that are out there. There's a lot of best of breeds on each of these lines, in each of these marketplaces, and that's good news. Whenever you have options as a buyer, it's good news. But with options comes the danger of you making a wrong decision, and that's what we'll be talking about today: is how do you select software and make the right decision for your unique needs. And as always, here's that disclaimer. We feel very strongly about this because we think it's a real differentiator in our industry. When it comes to independence, you're going to be I will be mentioning a slew of vendor names today and showing some logos from different vendors. I want you to understand that we do not have any relationship with those vendors that we cover. We don't consult to them. We don't advise them on their product strategy. We don't speak at their events. We don't take travel hospitality from them. We don't take a cup of coffee from them. So we think that's, like I said, unique in our space, and it's something, quite frankly, we're very proud of. So I wanted to just put that out there so you know that when we talk about vendors, we don't have their interests in mind. Really, what we're trying to do is we have only the buyers of technology's interest in mind, and we try to help you make the right decisions. So let's start out by talking about the wrong way to select web content management technology, or technology in general. Some of these are truths that spread across all of the different areas, but and again, we'll be digging into web content management specifically, but let's look at 6 ways that I see these projects kind of going off the rails, and some of the trends that we've noticed in helping many organizations go through these types of processes. So the first one we call blind love, and this one can take many forms, but think of it like this. You go to a technology conference and you walk the technology show floor, and you see a lot of great demonstrations that really look really slick and nice, and you leave that conference saying, wow, I found the answer. This is just what we need. And you go back to your organization and say, let's bring these guys in. They know exactly what I'm looking for. Might work, but in many cases we've seen that the slickness that you saw at that conference doesn't always translate to real life, and just looking at 1 or 2 or just a couple different options when it comes to picking the right software for you you can miss out on a lot of other important options as well. The second one is something we call happiness is a warm set of binders. And here what we're referring to is this traditional approach of starting a new technology selection project and going out and identifying every single requirement you can possibly think of, listing it out into a spreadsheet, making it the bulk of a request for proposal, an RFP that goes out, and putting it on the street. And what you get back is something that looks like this graphic here. You get a ton of responses back, and quite frankly, it can be a waste of time for you and the vendors that you're putting through this process, and it's very difficult to make any sense of what you got back. Many times when in actuality what you're getting back is a bunch of check marks and yeses to all of your requirement questions that say, yes, we can do this, yes, we can do this, yes, we can do this, but they don't tell you how they can do it. Right, and so that doesn't really help you, and it might get you somewhat closer, but it takes a long time to go through all that. The next kind of traditional approach is the my Cousin Vinnie approach, and this is where you might mention to a colleague or a friend or even relative that, hey, we're in the market for a new web content management system, and your friend might say, oh, well, we just did this at our company. We went with WordPress or Adobe, and it was great for us, so it was probably going to be good for you. So let me set you guys up. Well, again, the chances of that working are probably pretty slim, because I bet their needs are much different from your own. Number 4 in my list is the family car, and this is one that we see over and over again, where I'll say, someone in the marketing department says, we need a web content management system. What we have is just not working for us. They go to a meeting and mention this to their IT colleagues, and their IT colleagues say, oh, well, we already have SharePoint, or we already have Drupal. Why don't you just go with that? Well, again, not really looking at what else is on the marketplace, and what often happens is organizations end up shoehorning their requirements into something that they already have. And I liken this to when I got my first car. I expected something red and shiny, but I didn't expect something to look like this. But in actuality, this is what I ended up with. Number 5 on the list is what we call the horse race, and this is particularly topical, I think, after coming off this weekend's Kentucky Derby. But if any of you have ever been to a horse race, and you want to put a little wager on that race, when you arrive at the track, you get a little pamphlet information that gives you some really high-level information about the horses, and then you make a decision based on that. And so it's very limited research and a lot of risk on really what is a guess. And put this in make a parallel to what we see in the real world on a constant basis is, people do their research when looking for new technology, and they do very, very light research. They start by Googling, different options, and then they'll read some of the vendor websites, and they'll learn a little bit. And I don't discourage you from doing that, as a starting point, but don't end there, right? You need to do much more research than that, and so that you're not just betting and hoping that one of these comes out on your side. And finally, number 6 in my list is the integrator first mentality. And we get this question all the time. People ask Real Story Group, what should we do first? Should we pick a technology first, or should we pick an integrator who's going to integrate that technology first and have them help us pick the technology? I feel pretty passionately about this, having worked for an integrator prior to becoming an analyst. I equate this to a little bit like if you were going out to buy a car, and you went to the Jeep guys to help you pick that car. Well, what do you think the Jeep guys are going to recommend? They're going to recommend what they know best, right? It's a little bit like going to that integrator who might know a lot about one or two or maybe a handful of web content management systems, but they don't know the whole marketplace, right? They don't, and you're, again, hoping that they know something that's a good fit for you. So our recommendation is almost always pick the technology that's the best fit for what it is you're trying to do, and then go find an integrator who is also a good fit for you and also but really understands the technology that you've already selected as a good fit. If there's one common theme here, it's really let's not let it come down to chance. Right? We want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and make sure that we're confident in our decision making. So if we were to flip the page here and talk about the right way, what is the right way? Well, like I said a little bit earlier, we've tried to codify and put a methodology in place for doing this type of technology selection. We call it RSVP, is our silly little name, but it's the Real Story vendor procurement process. But really what we're trying to get across here is that the right way is an educated way, it's an empirical way, and it's an agile way. Educated in the sense that you really understand the marketplace that is out there at your disposal. You understand the strengths of the different players in the marketplace, but maybe more importantly, you understand the weaknesses of the players in the marketplace. Empirical in the sense that we want any process like this to be very test-based, so that you are able to get actual evidence and make decisions based on actual evidence that you learned in tests, not on fuzzy logic. And finally, we want it to be agile in the sense that this type of process should be iterative, and you should be able to sharpen your use cases over time through your hands-on trial and error, and really adapt this process as you go along, so that you're very confident at the end that this is the right selection for you. So if we were to break out what we call RSVP, the perfect process, it's really a 6-phase process that is comprised of 20 different steps. Now, we're not going to go through all 20 steps today. We don't have time for that. But this is what we do when we help some of our larger clients go through a process like this. We encourage you to go through as many steps as possible. But fundamentally, it's six different phases that are designed to test throughout and winnow your choices down, so that at the end of this process, you can make a confident decision. Now, we're going to go through this in a simpler way, but it really is, like I said, a winnowing down process where you're looking at a reasonable amount of options and doing your due diligence and testing along the way, so that you're confident at the end. So let's start at step 1, which is what we'll call, you got to get to the right short list. And what we call the short list is, we call it a little bit of a longish short list. So we think you can't do due diligence on the entire marketplace of web content management systems. There's just too many out there, and there's more every day. So what we recommend is you start looking at 10 to 12. Here's what we call our logo landscape, which shows a breakdown of the current marketplace as we see it in 2014. Now, these are not all of the products that are out there, but these are some of the more significant products and platforms that we see on the market that we cover in our research. Now we're constantly adding and subtracting based on what we consider the most significant in the marketplace, but I show you this because, again, you can't do due diligence on all 30 to 40 that we have on the screen right here. What you want to do is get to that longest short list. So how do we do that? Well, we think you should start by doing some research and looking at the different tiers of products and platforms, right? What we're showing here is really a spectrum from a more complicated platform on the left to a more productized offering on the right. And within that spectrum, there's a breakdown, what we call upper range platforms, mid-range platforms, mid-range products, and then simpler products. So as you begin to learn about these categorization, you can kind of say, well, we probably fit into this area, and then you can start doing your due diligence on a smaller subset of vendors. But we want you to go beyond just an analyst's view of what the marketplace looks like. We want you to really identify what it is you're really trying to do. And we call that identifying your scenarios. We have an application that we offer to our subscribers that's called the Custom Shortlist Builder. And one of the key questions of the Custom Shortlist Builder is, what are your scenarios? Because the reason we do this is because we have found in our research that certain products are developed with a certain scenario in mind. Now, their salespeople might say they're good at all the scenarios, but what we found is that's just not true. We found that certain products have strengths in certain scenarios, or catering to certain scenarios, and weaknesses in others. So we want you to really begin to look at which scenarios do you really fit in. And so when we look at something like web content management, if I blow these scenarios up, we've identified 11 different scenarios here, ranging from very simpler site type scenarios versus to real complex site scenarios, to mid-range scenarios, or even internal digital workplace scenarios. So what we want you to do is self-identify where do we fit, and then begin to look at the products that really excel to catering at these types of scenarios. And that's how you really should get to the right shortlist. And I encourage you to, if this is something that if you're in this place right now looking at these scenarios, if you're a subscriber, go online and check out the shortlist builder. If you're not a subscriber, you can play around and see how it works. You won't be able to see all the research at the end, but I encourage you to check it out. Once you get to that shortlist, then I want you to do some really hardcore due diligence, right? Now I want you to begin to dig into the details and look at the strengths and weaknesses across a variety of areas. And these are just to show you some of all of the areas that we evaluate each of the web content management systems that we look at in our research. We evaluate them and put them head to head in terms of rankings on their strengths and weaknesses in all of these different areas. The technology areas, the content areas, and the experience services areas. So once you're able to narrow it down to lists, we want you to send out an RFP. Now remember that example I gave at the beginning when I said that happiness is a warm set of binders. We really want to avoid that. So we want you to avoid sending out the RFP that's comprised of solely just a huge laundry list of requirements. Try to get beyond that. Try to get to what we call a use case or scenario-based RFP. And there's a little bit of art and a little bit of science in something like this, but really what I'm describing here is I want you to create a narrative use case that really paints a picture of what it is you're trying to do. Right? I want you to paint a picture of your situation, but I want you to be descriptive without being overly prescriptive, right? That's where the little art and science comes in. You want to make sure you do things like describe real actors in your organization, real people who would be interacting with the technology. You want to talk about real environments. You want to talk about real types of content and describe real processes. what this does is really, again, paints a picture for you internally, so that you all on your teams all are on the same page of what it is you're trying to do. But it also gives the vendor a good sense of, is this a good fit for us, and should we bid on this project? We found that this methodology works a lot better than the checklist method. And this is one of my favorite slides. You know, it's easy to focus on what's hot and cool in a marketplace. You know, buyers, I'm sure you all fall into this category. I fall into this category too. We always like to look at those features that are hot and really powerful, and those are the ones that some people tend to focus their RFPs on. But I want you to also remember, we can't lose sight of the important stuff, the kind of the not sexy stuff that's out there, the workflow and the audit trails and the version control and the way the system handles metadata. And these are the things that really impact your day-to-day life. Sure, is the stuff on the left important? Absolutely, but don't be blinded by the stuff on the left and ignore, at the expense of ignoring the stuff on the right. Next, we want you to do a real vendor demo that is really helpful to your team. One of the perks of my job is I get to sit in many a vendor demo. Well, it's not always a perk, I tell you that. This is I like to think that's not really me, but I think I put myself in that guy's in the middle position, where I've seen some pretty horrible demos, and many times those demos are of the canned variety. They're the demos that the vendors try to show every single potential client of theirs, and they all look good and they're slick and but a lot of times they're just really irrelevant to the buyer's organization and their unique needs. So what I encourage you to do is get the vendors to demonstrate your scenarios. So after you digest the RFP responses, I want you to encourage them to come in and demo your scenarios and really structure those demos so that you're seeing an apples to apples to apples comparison, right? I want you to have 3 to 4 vendors come in on consecutive days, and I want you to structure those demo days so that you're seeing scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, scenario 4, on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, and that by Friday, you'll be able to clearly understand which vendor is the best fit for what you are trying to do. And finally, the last step here is, once you're able to down select after the vendor demo week to a finalist or multiple finalists, we want you to do bake-off or proof of concept. And many times we call it a competitive proof of concept if you have a final 2. What I want you to do here is try to mimic a real project as much as possible. So I want you to go to the final 2 vendors and actually have them build out several of your real scenarios. I want you, once you do that, I want you to get your team to try out the different systems and put real content into the system. I want your real people who are actually going to be end users of the system to really test drive this product. And if possible, I want you to install it in your own environment. People always say, well, isn't this just really cost prohibitive? How can we possibly do this with our 2 vendor finalists? Well, it is pretty resource intensive. But I can honestly say the most successful projects that we've ever seen, the most successful selection projects we've ever seen, are the projects that went through a full bake-off, a competitive bake-off, because they really understood what it was like to use the technology. They were able to get their hands on it. That you weren't just seeing a demo, but also, maybe even more importantly, they were able to learn what it was like to work with the particular vendor. Right, and sometimes you're even working with an integrator at this point. You know, you're bringing in a third party to see how they work together as well, and how your team interacts with them, and that's what the real life is going to be after you sign on the dotted line and actually purchase this product. So it gives you a really good sense of what it might be like to work with them. And hopefully at this point, you're very confident in your decision. You've done your homework, you're educated, you've done an empirical process where you're being able to test at the RFP stage, you're able to test via the custom demos in the demo stage, and you're able to test head-to-head during a bake-off phase. And again, it's an agile process in the sense that you're able to focus on the scenarios that are most important to you as you go along, and really test them to your unique and most important needs. And all along, you're looking at fit, right? That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to find something that's the best fit. There's no best vendor out there, but there's a vendor that in product that's a good fit for you. So you're looking for a scenario fit. What's the best scenario fit? You're looking at what's a good technology fit. You know, making sure that whatever they're proposing fits within your environments. You're looking for a good partner, and that's what that bake-off will truly tell you. And as always, you're looking for a good value fit. You want to make sure that you, by the end of this process, the vendor's learning a lot about you as a buyer as much as you're learning about them as a vendor. And in that learning process, we found that the estimates tend to get better and better as you both learn more about each other, and so that you're really sure about the value you're getting, and so that there's not huge cost surprises as you go through an implementation. I hope this comes across as obvious, but what we're describing here is a little bit different than a traditional model. The traditional model is where you spend a lot of time up front and do a lot of requirement gathering, and when you send out those RFPs, you kick off a project, and then you do an implementation. What we're describing is spending less time up front on requirements, but spending more time doing your testing in your RFP proposal and demos, doing more testing in your bake-off, doing more testing in a live pilot, rolling right into a phased implementation. So you're getting more value, you're learning more lessons, and you're getting learning those lessons earlier in the process as opposed to waiting till it's too late. So with that, I would encourage anyone who would like any more information about what we talked about today. I know we just went through a ton of stuff in a short period of time, and it was a really high-level overview of something that we do quite often. We've helped dozens of organizations every year go through these types of selection projects. But if you're looking to go through one of these projects, I encourage you to first look at the research, download a sample of our research. You'll get an actual chapter from the Web Content Management report. I encourage you to do that. I think you'll learn a lot from that. You'll learn how deep our evaluations tend to get. If anyone wants more help, feel free to contact me. My information's on here, or any one of us at the Real Story Group, and we'd be glad to help you.